Good morning, family. The Old Testament contains thousands of historical accounts of the ancient Hebrews, even before the religion that we now know as Judaism existed. Of course, the ancient Hebrews worshipped God, but the practice of the religion had not yet been formalized. That wouldn't begin to take place until the time of Moses. Today we're going back to an event that is the basis for God's original covenant with the Hebrew people, the binding of Isaac in Genesis chapter 22. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown to him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. He himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father," and he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So the 2 of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." The word of the Lord. One thing we need to realize about this passage is that Isaac was the son God had promised to Abraham and his wife Sarah. They were both very old, but God provided for this miracle child to be born when Sarah was well past childbearing age. For God to have asked for that son to be offered back to him doesn't make sense to us. As I've said many times, I am not a scholar of the Bible, so I won't try to interpret this very nuanced story. Instead, I will offer this musical anecdote. There are very few pieces of music that do this story justice, but one of them is a piece that I've performed by the 20th century English composer Benjamin Britten. The full title is Canticle 2, Abraham and Isaac, and he wrote it for alto, tenor, and piano. About 5 years ago, I was able to perform it with my undergrad voice professor at a recital that she gave at Hardin-Simmons University. If you want to hear the full recording, I'll gladly send it to you, but I'm only putting small chunks of it in this video because of copyright law. In Britten's setting, the voice of God is uniquely rendered by all 3 performers, like so. The tenor sings the role of Abraham,
Make thee ready, my dear darling, for we must do a little thing.
and the alto sings the role of Isaac. The Canticle tells the story in a very unique way, since it's based on a medieval Christian version of the story and not the actual Hebrew passage from Genesis that we read earlier. The point of the story is the covenant that God made with Abraham after the angel told him not to kill his son. beginning at verse 15. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this, and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will indeed bless you, and I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of their enemies, and by your offspring shall all the nations of the earth gain blessing for themselves, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived at Beersheba. Our obedience of God is paramount. We don't know. God knows. We don't understand. God understands. We can't see the end. God sees the end, the beginning, and everything in between. God calls us to trust in Him, and with that trust comes our reward forever. Be blessed this day until we meet again. And in the meantime, wear your mask and wash your hands.